Hello and welcome to EdVantage. My name is Marie Huntsinger and I'm going to be your sociology professor. Today we're going to be talking about sociological research methods. Alright, so let's review this term positivism that we discussed a few videos ago. So positivism is the idea that we can observe trends in society using the scientific method. So positivism became popular around the Age of Enlightenment when people started moving away from religion and mysticism and more towards trying to use science in order to interpret our world. Auguste Comte, here again, said that we could use the scientific method in positivism in order to try to find out sociological facts and to use the scientific method in sociology. Okay, so what is the scientific method? Let's review. I'm sure you've seen this before. So the number one step that we do for the scientific method is we usually start with an observation or a question that we want to answer. So a good question that a sociologist would ask, remember we're interested in everything social, so we'd be interested in, is there a relationship between a student's race and a teacher's race on the test scores that a student might receive on a standardized test? So, maybe, I don't know. Has there been any research done on this before? Well, that's when we would go to our library's database and look through the previous research to see what has been done on that before. And if it's been done before, that's okay. We might want to look at, is it old? Was it done in the 1970s? Because certainly society has changed since then, so we might want to do a replication study. There's nothing wrong with a replication study. In fact, it's good science to do replication studies. They're just not done as often as new studies because they're not seen as sexy. So first we do the review of the previous research, and even if there is previous research that's done more recently, maybe we want to change a variable or maybe we want to change a sample population. And then we formulate a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is a testable statement that we put to the test using research in order to see if our educated guess is true or false. So for an example, a hypothesis from the former example that I used could be that when a student and teacher share a race, students' test scores are higher on standardized tests. Then we design a research method in order to test our hypothesis. So we're going to talk about the different types of research methods next video, but mostly there are two types: quantitative, which is used statistical analysis, and qualitative, which is more interpretive analysis, but we'll talk a little bit about that later. After we design our research method, then we go out and we collect our data. So depending on the research method that we choose, we might do a survey, we might conduct interviews, we might do an observation of a classroom or a household, for example. After we collect our data, we analyze it. So if you're using quantitative, you might use a statistical software program like SPSS or SAS. If you're doing an interview, you will transcribe all of your interview notes and try to find themes within the interview notes. After we analyze our data, then we write up all of our research results. And ideally, as sociologists, we're going to want to try to publish those results in a peer-reviewed journal. A peer review means that other scientists and sociologists are looking at your data, looking at your methods and your results in order to make sure that they are scientifically sound, because we don't want to be putting out there bad science, right? And then ideally, we want someone to repeat our study, see if they find the same results that we find. And essentially, that's the scientific method in sociology. Okay, so I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but sociologists, we have two types of studies. We have qualitative research, and again, this is focused on interpretive analysis. So some qualitative methods include interviewing, observation, participant ethnography, and we'll talk about what each one of those are next video. And we have quantitative research, and this is more focused on statistical analysis. So the major research that we use for quantitative is surveys or data sets. For example, the US Census would be a large survey conducted every 10 years of the entire United States. Sociologists often use the census to try to figure out how changes in the demographics, like by race, income, where people are moving, etc. Okay, so some research terms. Let's dive into some terminology. So the first thing that we have is the population that you're interested in studying. So your population is everyone that you care about for your research. So for example, American women or students of color. But of course it would be impossible to interview or survey all American women or all students of color. And so that's why we choose a sample from the population in order to conduct our research. Ideally, a sample is random and representative of the entire population. And so what we mean by a random sample is that everyone in the population has an equal chance of being selected. Generalizability means that we are applying a finding from a smaller sample to a wider population. So the larger your sample, usually the more statistically significant it is. And if you have a random sample, then that means that we can generalize it to the wider population. So if I'm interested in all American women, but I only interview middle-class white women, I cannot generalize to all American women. All right, so let's talk about some more terms here. A variable is any entity that can take on different values. So certain variables that sociologists are interested in would be anything related to your demographics: age, race, gender, religion, economic status, for example. And we distinguish between dependent variables and independent variables in research. So your dependent variable is the variable that is being tested or measured, and the independent variable is a variable that sociologists change or controls. So you can kind of think of the dependent variable as the outcome, and the independent variable is what you're changing or what you're controlling. So for example, Professor Huntsinger wants to test if feeding students candy before an exam impacts test results. In this particular instance, the independent variable would be the quantity of candy and that is given to the students. So either one piece of candy, 2 pieces of candy, or no pieces of candy. And the dependent variable would be the outcome or the student's test results. Okay, so let's talk about some really important terms here called correlation and causation. Now, oftentimes people confuse this in research, and it's really important to know the difference. So correlation is a relationship between 2 variables. So for example, let's say that I'm interested in, does owning a pet increase your life expectancy? Well, so say we conduct some life course studies and we follow people across their life to figure out if owning a pet means that they live longer. And we do find a relationship. That would be a correlation. So it could be that owning a pet, you live on average 5 years longer than someone who doesn't own a pet. Okay, well that's a correlation or relationship between pet ownership and life expectancy. But is it fair? Could we say that owning a pet causes you to live longer? Not exactly, right? Because there could be something else, another variable. It could be that the type of person who owns a pet is different in another way. Perhaps they tend to exercise more often, or maybe have less stress than people who don't own a pet, or more money. So that's correlation. And causation is, well, causal. And that's something causes something else. So one variable causes an effect to happen. So it's just really important when you're looking at research in the media. Oftentimes they'll say something like, new research shows that drinking beer causes you to lose weight. It's really important to know, okay, how much beer? Does it really cause you to lose weight? Is it correlation or causation? So it's really good to be critical of the research that you see in popular culture and media. Okay, so another example is the ice cream and drowning example that's pretty popular. So did you know that when ice cream sales increase, the drowning rate also increases? Does that make sense? Wait, does eating ice cream really cause you to drown? Oh my goodness, we better alert the masses. No, that doesn't make sense, right? Is there something else going on? Perhaps maybe the summertime? Maybe that's the variable that we're missing, or the heat, right? So when people are hot and when it's summertime, people tend to do more water-based activities, and people tend to also buy more ice cream. And so the two are correlated, but one doesn't cause the other, unless perhaps maybe you get a cramp from eating a drumstick too fast, but that's probably unlikely. Okay, some more research terms. Woo, yeah. So reliability implies consistency. So for example, say a personality test, you take it 3 times. If that test is reliable, you should get the same personality traits all 3 times. If you get different personality traits all 3 times, then that is not a very reliable test. And validity is making sure, are we measuring what we intend to measure? So for example, IQ tests in the past have been criticized, not for measuring intelligence, but for measuring cultural competence. So for example, someone from a certain cultural background may know ruby as a name instead of a stone. And so that child might get that question wrong, on an IQ test. But does that mean that child is less intelligent? No, it just means that child hasn't been exposed to that term before. Okay, please join me for our next video on types of research and ethics used in sociology. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.